My robot vacuum. My robot vacuum is over here cramping my style right now. It's in my office because I pressed the go button, and I didn't think that it was going to come in here first. So now I have to sit here and wait for it to be done because it is too noisy to record while I am doing this thing or whatever. So we're just waiting. Just waiting. Bye, Tony. All right. Anyway, Tony's done now. What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? Welcome to What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Nance Cast. How are you all doing? I hope you're well. I'm chilling. It's a fine afternoon. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. Things are great. I hope you're all well. Anyway, what's going on, man? Welcome back. Welcome back. This is, of course, another solo dolo brolo episode of the Nance Cast. And boy, howdy, is it a good one. I was walking my dogs this morning and we got attacked by this like stray poodle. It was some kind of poodle. I think it was a poodle mix because I'm not sure what a poodle really is. I just know that it had really curly hair. But it didn't look like a poodle. But then again, I don't know what a poodle really is. You know, other than like the poodles in cartoons and stuff. Like I don't know if I've ever seen a poodle in real life. I just know that people like to mix their dog with poodle, like a chihuahua or a doodle or a labradoodle or whatever. And they have like curly hair. So I think we got attacked by some hybrid, poodle hybrid. It might have been a skinwalker. But yeah, we got attacked. We didn't really get attacked, and it was actually really cute, and I would have taken it home. But it had a collar on it and all that stuff. It was somebody's dog in the neighborhood. It had got out. So we saved the day, but, yeah, that was a bit funny. It was like bouncy and hoppy in my dogs. I have two bulldogs. They were like, what in the world is that? And it came over to us and started playing, and my dogs started playing, and we got all wrapped up in their leashes, and I did not let go of their leashes. That's one thing. Where I live, there are a few people who like to let their dogs off leash in the neighborhood, and this dog was not that. This dog got out. But there are people who think it's totally cool to let their dog off leash and go walk their dog around the neighborhood. And maybe your dog is well trained. Maybe your dog is very well behaved. Maybe. But yeah, when you're out walking your dog in the common area, put a leash on your dog. Also, these people who let their dog off leash are the same people who let their dogs pee. Yeah, dogs pee, but let their dogs poop everywhere, and they don't bother to clean it up. And that's really annoying, people. Have some damn decency. Have some respect. Respect yourself. Respect your surroundings. Respect your neighbors and your neighborhood. Pick up after your dogs. Don't let your dogs off leash unless you're in a designated off leash area. My neighborhood is not. My neighborhood, it's actually a law in the town I live in. If you have a dog out in a common area, they must have a leash on, unless otherwise posted. We have dog parks, and we take my dogs to the dog park and they play and they roll around with the other dogs, and my dogs are rejects. My dogs are dogs that people had because they're like, oh, it's a bulldog. It's a cute bulldog. We're going to be bougie and get an expensive bulldog. And then it turns out they don't bother to train them. And then when they're like a year old, they're like, this dog is not well behaved. This dog is not smart. This dog is stubborn. What am I going to do? I have to give this dog away. So those are both of my dogs. They're both stubborn. They're both just heathens. And we've tried to do our best at training them, but there's also only so much you can do with that kind of dog that, you get from someone else, and they have like just no foundation. So my dogs are, a bit slow, a bit special, if you will. So they like to like jump and roll and bark and play and be dumb and silly, but they're super duper cute. Actually, I'm wearing a shirt with my dogs on it right now. I didn't realize that. Look at my dogs, Charlie and Winston. They're super cute. I think this was a birthday present or a Father's Day present. Can't remember. But my dogs are super duper cute, and they're also dumb. They're as dumb as they look. But they're dumb, and they're also sweet, and they're very sweet. But they're not well trained. They're not well behaved. They're not the kind of dog that you could say, 9, and then they do the, backflip or whatever, like people with those super duper well trained dogs. My dogs are spoiled. My dogs are pampered. And I act accordingly. I keep them on. We have short leashes. When we get to the park, I have a little bit longer leash, and we'll run around a bit to let them run. But when we're walking in the neighborhood, we have short leashes. I don't know. They're maybe 3 feet or so. And they walk with me, and they walk at my side, and, and we pick up the poop when it comes out. It's just like, have some decency, dude. What's wrong with you people? And look, I live in the suburbs, and I live in a particular suburb as well. Like it's if you're from Phoenix, or the Phoenix area, and I mean from here, not if you moved here at some point, but like if you grew up here, Gilbert is the town I live in. Gilbert has a particular reputation, and it has, that reputation for good reason, and it's largely socioeconomic reasons. Like those reasons largely come down ultimately to class, and class standing. I was going to say status, but they come down to class, they come down to status, they come down to standing. So these are socioeconomic reasons. Yes, there's definitely some stereotyping that goes on that everyone that lives here is a douche, but also there are a lot of douches that live here. It's kind of like Scottsdale, same thing. Gilbert is like the older version of Scottsdale. Scottsdale, you have a lot of young douches. Gilbert, you have a lot of older douches. But now things have changed. Now these people aren't douches by choice. Largely, some are. Many are, in fact. But now largely you have people who are like trying to achieve a lifestyle that they saw simulated when they were younger, and that they were trained to aspire to. But they can't do it. They can't keep up with it because the precarity has increased and intensified. So you have a lot of people who are actually very precarious, but they don't want to admit it to themselves. So they keep going and going and going, trying to keep up with the rat race. And they just can't do it. The bottom is falling out. The wheels are falling off. So I don't blame most of these people for being douchey and doing douchey things. I like to think that when I do dumb shit, people give me the grace and try to have some understanding of why I might do the dumb shit I do. And then, maybe not do the apologia. You can take that a little bit too far, but you should try to understand where people are coming from. So when people do douchey shit, you shouldn't get mad at them and be like, I fucking hate you. You should be like, damn, I hate the fact that the world we live in puts people in these positions where they just lack self-awareness. They lack critical distance. But that is the world we live in. Now, I also grew up in the hood, and I know there are a lot of people who didn't grow up in the hood who think, the hood has a certain reputation. And there's stray dogs running around, stray cats running around, stray children running around doing all that mess. And, I don't want to go into like an analysis of the differences of like living in the burbs versus living in the hood. But there are some stark differences, but it's also true that there are largely socioeconomic reasons for all the dumb shit that goes on wherever you are. And yeah, there's all that. So welcome to the Nancecast, where we talk about structural reasons for personal problems. And, other things too. I don't know if you can hear Tony. That's the Right Reverend Antonio Banderas. That's my vacuum. But he's going, and he's in the hallway right now next to my office. So I don't know if you can hear it or not. That's what that noise is. I'm not going to bother to go back through and do background processing. So you're welcome for that noise there, folks, if you can hear it. Maybe you can't. I can, and it is a bit distracting. Anyway, like I said, another solo dolo episode of the Nancecast. And I felt like last week I was going to record something and I didn't. I felt like shit. But I felt like recording something right now, and I actually have shit to do here in a little bit. So we're gonna try to make this a quick recording, try to get it done so I can go on and actually do shit that I have to do. But there's some things on my mind. I wanted to talk about them. And I think I'll start by saying I've recently started rewatching The X-Files. And I don't even know if it's appropriate to say rewatching. Because when The X-Files was on TV in its initial run, I was a kid and I watched it. And it's weird going back now, watching all these first season episodes. Like, I remember watching this on TV. So I watched The X-Files as a kid through its initial run and sometimes through, syndication. But I don't think I've ever seen The X-Files in its entirety. Now, I have seen every series of Star Trek in its entirety. So when I say like, oh, I'm rewatching Star Trek, well, that's also weird too, because I also often put on Star Trek as like background TV noise or whatever. We all have these TV shows, right? Or many of us, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have background TV shows that we put on. Star Trek is mine. I have a few. Star Trek is my main one, though, and it's usually TNG. Sometimes it's DS9. Sometimes it's even Voyager. So I can't really say I've rewatching Star Trek. What's a show that I would say I'm rewatching? Because it would have to be something that I could say I watched, and I think Star Trek is probably the only series that I would say I've watched, because I have watched it in its entirety multiple times. I've sat and kind of analyzed the details of some of the episodes. Like that's a proper watching, like not just having it on to go to sleep to or whatever, but actually like watching the shit out of it. In the same way you read a book, you read, you reread, you reread again. That was my washing machine just sent me a text message. My laundry is done. Isn't it cool that we live in a world where my robot vacuum does its thing, and it also texts me when there's something going on, when it's finished, or if there's an obstacle in the way and it gets stuck, or if it runs out of juice or whatever. My laundry machine texts me and says, hey, your laundry's done. The TV could send me a text if I set it up to do so. I don't have that turned on because that would be insane. But yeah, I have my laundry machines text me when the laundry load is done. My robot vacuum does the same thing. My car can send me a text message if it needs to. Yeah, I'm pretty sure my fridge could probably send me a text message too if I bothered to set that up. My house could even send me a text message. Like if I put on the the like intruder beware mode. The house could send me a text message. We have the fucking doorbell camera. That thing sends you a notification when someone's at the door. When someone rings the doorbell, it's someone's here. What a world, man. All our inanimate objects do this like simulated communication with us, and it's crazy. It's also interesting that like people, when they design products, they have to account for like a level of anthropomorphization, that so we don't over anthropomorphize these objects, these commodities, because if we do, and we develop like a close bond with them, or if we develop a type of care or concern rather, but you know, it's blurring the lines a little bit, you start to care too much about these objects, and you don't want to replace them when their time is up. You know, like if your coffee machine is broken, but you also have like a bond with it because it sends you nice little good morning text messages and stuff like that, then you'll actually feel kind of bad when it comes time to replace it. So it's weird that, you know, product design in the world we live in today. What a world. What a world. What a world. What a world. But anyway, I actually am going to go switch my laundry so it doesn't get mildewy, and then I'll be right back. So this might actually be where I insert an ad. I like doing my little ads. So maybe not. I might just come right back. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see to find out, folks. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch that dial. I'll be right back.
All right, and we're back.
We're back. Yay, we're back. Yay. We're back.
Anyway, what's up, everybody? We're back. We're back. Oh, geez Louise. So anyway, watching the X-Files. I'm going back to the X-Files. I'm watching the X-Files. I also watched the first season of The Real World. Now, I did not watch The Real World when it was on TV. In fact, I've never watched The Real World. So going and watching the first season of The Real World was very interesting to me. Now, I have been watching The Challenge. I don't know. Sometime last year, I discovered this TV show called The Traitors. And it actually, I think it goes back to before that. There was this show on Netflix called The Mole. And I watched like 5 episodes. I did not finish it, but I watched it. And there was something about it that fascinated me. But ultimately, I was like, this is fucking stupid. I can't watch this. So I didn't watch it. And then, you know, probably a few months later, I discovered this TV show called Traitors. Now, I stumbled upon Traitors because we were like sitting around the house at night after dinner. And we were like looking at stuff that was on the TV. And it was like, you know, the Voice or the America's Got Talent or the America's Next Big Idol or like those types of shows. Those are good background TV shows for, you know, family time or whatever, when you're sitting around and like talking or playing a game, but you need background noise. And background noise is an interesting phenomenon that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and hopefully have some time to write about it, because it is very interesting. Why do we need background noise? But anyway, those types of shows I think are good background noise, good background TV. And we were flipping around and it was like America's Got Talent or whatever. And then The Traitors shows up and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I put on The Traitors. And it captivated me. I was fascinated. It got its hooks in me from the jump. So I watched all the seasons of The Traitors. I watched The Traitors US, UK, New Zealand, Australia. Like I love The Traitors. And I don't love it. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's well made. I think it is well made, actually. And it's very interesting to see the differences from the US to the UK and Australia and New Zealand. It's very interesting. And it is well made, but I don't think it's good. but for some reason I like it, and it's fascinating, and it's all about people trying to like hide the truth from other people, trying to lie to people, trying to mislead people in order to win. But there's also like a competitive element to it as well. Like, well, yeah, I guess that would be competitive if you're trying to lie to people, or mislead people or deceive people. But there's also like a physical challenge element to it where they do stuff. They roll a heavy thing up a hill or jump off a tall thing or whatever. And it was the deception element, I think, that initially fascinated me. Same thing with the mole. Like the mole has an element of deception. And I think that's what caught my eye. But the show just sucked. I think the traders managed to make a better show. I don't know exactly what it is. But so the deceptive element was initially fascinating to me because I was like, oh, it's just people lying to people. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird that we turn that into entertainment. People are like knowingly being deceived, and people are lying, and there's a lot of like emotional turmoil that comes along with it. People are really struggling with lying, and I don't know. It's really compelling, but it's also fascinating that we turned that into entertainment. Like we turn this weird social dynamic of like trying to cope with the other in this weird way where I don't know. It's just it's weird. It's weird that it's entertainment. I think that Paranoia is having a massive comeback. I think Paranoia stunts us. It's stifling. I don't think people can really kind of come into their fullness if they're paranoid. And I think it's important to make an active choice to overcome the paranoia. I think, paranoia can come for any of us. And not like pathological paranoia, but just this mindset of like everyone is lying to me. Everyone is out to get me. I can't trust anybody. I think that's a hindrance to humankind. And I think it's possible to, be fully aware of the fact that some people will lie to you. Some people will try to deceive you and take advantage of you and hurt you. But you can't be the type of person who's like, I don't trust anybody. I think I think a crucial part of being a human is being able to overcome that. And there are people who will be like, I don't trust anybody. And it's like, well, that to me just kind of demonstrates that you don't trust yourself. I don't know, like that deception is fascinating to me, and that type of paranoia, because I think it's a very useful tool for keeping us down, and I think we have to like actively choose to rise above that kind of paranoia. And it's just so crazy that we turned it into entertainment. We watch it on TV. But there's also like a physical, athletic element of this show, The Traders. So we watched all The Traders, exhausted all the available seasons. So I was like looking for a new kind of TV to watch. Mix it up. You can't watch Star Trek every night. And I started watching The Challenge. Because, I was just looking, and I was like, oh, I know what that is. I saw the commercials. I'm aware of MTV and the road rules and the real world and The Challenge. It's in the cultural zeitgeist, or it's in my cultural zeitgeist, whatever, being a elder millennial, I guess. I've been aware of it, but I've never watched it. But so I started watching The Challenge. And The Challenge scratches my junk food trash TV itch. I like watching The Challenge. I wouldn't say that I like The Challenge. I would say that I like watching The Challenge. So there's that. I was like, I'm going to just watch all this shit. So there's like 50 seasons available. So that'll keep me sated for a while. But recently I was like, what else can I watch? Can't watch the same thing every night. Just like you can't watch Star Trek every night. You can't watch The Challenge every night. So I was like, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to try new things. And I was like, oh, the X-Files, that's a good show. I love the X-Files. I watched it all through the 90s. But I never like sat and watched it and analyzed it and really thought about it. I just put it on at night. The X-Files and The Outer Limits, shit like that. That was always good TV to watch. But I'm watching the X-Files. And same thing with the Real World. I was like, oh, we'll put this in the rotation as well. So I watched the first season of the Real World over like 2 days because I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. So the first season of the Real World, I think, is actually decent social commentary. And I was very amused that like the stuff they were talking about in the Real World season 1 was a little bit uncanny. I was like, holy shit, this is basically the world we live in now. 30 years later, or more than 30 years later, I think. Yeah, it's like 34 years later, 35 years later. Nothing has gotten better. And in fact, some things have gotten worse. That's fucking crazy, dude. So yeah, if you wanna trip yourself out, go watch the first season of The Real World. And I actually do think it's decent social commentary. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, because like The Real World became just like sex and drama and like pornography essentially. And I think reality television is, I don't know. I think it's trash. I think it's disgusting junk. It is what social media is, just before devices and before the hyper-connected internet. But it's just that weird kind of pornographic, voyeuristic, weird trash. And so I don't know what MTV's goal was when they were getting into making The Real World, but either intentionally or accidentally, the first season turns out to be decent, documentary commentary on the world, or at least on parts of the world. Definitely could be a lot better than it was or is or whatever. But I was very surprised. I was like, this is better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be, drunk people, sex, drama, arguments, the obscene underbelly presenting itself to us so we can get off, so we don't have to go out and engage in excessive activities, so we can go home and work. You get your explosive jouissance by watching this half-hour TV show broken up by advertisements for useless commodities. That's ultimately what these things do. But it turns out the first season of The Real World, at least, I would call it decent. It gets a thumb, not up, but not down either. It gets a middle thumb. So there's that. And the X-Files is interesting to me because, all these, like I was saying, all these first season episodes, I'm like, damn, I remember this. I remember watching this. Now, it's not like I have this eidetic memory and I can remember everything. And I'm like, I remember exactly what happens in this episode. But it was just like, I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, I remember this specific scene. I remember this shot. I remember that character that only shows up once. It's also interesting that the conspiracy theories that the X-Files is all about are the same exact ones that people are talking about today. The people in Congress are talking about these aliens and this alien disclosure and these conspiracies and this and that. I don't know. It was weird. I had this moment where, again, it was like, wow, 30 years later, nothing has progressed. Nothing has actually happened. Nothing has changed. Very, very interesting, folks. There's also, is the X-Files just kind of like manufacturing consent? Kind of like what I think with all the UFO stuff in Congress right now. I think it's to manufacture consent for something. I don't know what. but was the X-Files part of that, or was the X-Files actually people who really actually believed in these things? Like, I don't know. Don't know. I haven't really had that much time to fully think about it, but it's where my head is right now. So I wanted to share that with you all. If you guys find yourself bored on a Friday night with nothing to do, tune into the X-Files and think about, people are like, Alex Jones was right about everything, which it's fucking stupid to say because no, he wasn't. But also, I mean, there are some things that he wasn't entirely wrong about. Same thing with the X-Files. The X-Files was right about everything in this kind of hyperbolic fashion. And then after that, tune into The Real World Season 1. There's like a dozen episodes. And just kind of think about, wow, isn't it weird? Isn't it weird that the world hasn't changed as much as people like to think? And I think we kind of have no choice to pretend like it's changed so much, because we all feel like we've lost something. We all feel a missing piece. We all feel like, oh, the world was better back then. The world was better when I was younger. And it is funny watching that first season of The Real World. There are some things that it's like, wow, things have gotten worse, not better. This narrative of progress throughout history, it's very, very clearly a narrative. And it's a convenient one. But we all also feel bad or sad or lonely or exhausted or something. We're all missing something and we all feel it. And so we just assume that the world has changed so much. Of course, that's the reason why we feel so bad all the time, because we're caught up in this constant changing environment. We're uprooted. We can never find anywhere to kind of put our feet down and sit down and smell the roses. We're just caught up in this like change. So being confronted with evidence to the contrary of that was, I don't know, pretty cool. Because I think it's true in some respects, while it's also untrue in some other important respects. It's also true. There are things that are exactly the same as they've always been. And I think it's important to remember that, because I think it's easy to get carried away and caught up in this narrative of change. And then you can either look at change as progress, or you can look at change as regression. And then from there, you can go on to kind of postulate, a political position based on, a faulty narrative. So you should always, you should always be a little bit careful whenever you find yourself falling for a narrative, especially if it's compelling, especially if it turns out to be very, very convenient. Then you should, engage in some critical thinking. I'm not saying become Fox Mulder and do the far out there spooky Mulder thing and believe it's little green men from Mars controlling everything. But yeah, try to develop some critical distance. Try to develop some critical thinking and actually think. Don't just go with the flow. Don't allow yourself to be carried away on the waves of argument. But anyway, there's all that. I also wanted to talk about nihilism. Now, I consider myself a nihilist, and I have for a long time, and I think it's a good thing. I think nihilism is a good thing. Damn it. Hold on, I got another text message. All right. Okay. And we are back. And you may not have even known that I went anywhere. Those of you viewing, you will obviously notice things look different. Those of you just listening, you may have noticed a cut or, things sound a bit different. And yes, it is true. It is my tomorrow. But from your perspective, it's, 10 or 15 seconds later. So I haven't really gone anywhere, but yeah, I was trying to get an episode in, just didn't have time to do it, but I figured, I kind of liked where I was going and, didn't have time to get it done. So I figured it's tomorrow now. I'll try to finish up, the trajectory or whatever of these thoughts. And finish this episode and get it out, because that's something I like to do. But yes, it is true. Movie magic. It's tomorrow, but it's actually, not for you. So anyway, like I said, I liked where I was headed, and I was going into a kind of nihilism. Before we get there, I do want to go back to the whole paranoia thing just for a second, because I think it really does tie into this kind of nihilism that I want to talk about. And the type of paranoia that I'm talking about, I don't know if paranoia is the best word for it, but it's a word that it kind of describes this solipsistic, totalized, objectified position where people find themselves genuinely believing, maybe not everyone is out to get me, but everyone would get me if they had the chance to do so. So I need to develop this position toward everyone else that I'm going to get them before they get me. Or everyone's just waiting to take advantage of me. Everyone's waiting to manipulate me or whatever. People who, I guess, have that attunement to the other, I think find themselves becoming very manipulative people and people who are all too willing to take advantage of others at the first opportunity. And that it's that relationship, or that, like I said, attunement, where you never trust the other. You're always on watch for ulterior motives. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're always waiting to get fucked over. And so you find yourself fucking other people over. You also find yourself, I genuinely do believe that that forecloses the possibility of fully coming into your own as a human, as a subject, as an ethical subject. I think that's really important. I also think that's what the commodity, that's what capital, that's what exchange and utility, that's what all these things, these forces, these currents in the sea in which we swim, that's what they do to us. They close us off and they put us in this weird fucked up solipsistic relationship where everyone else is nothing but a utensil or a character on a stage for you to direct. And when you close off that ethical dimension, you're not really able to really do anything worth doing, I think. Now, you may achieve some quote unquote great things or amazing things or whatever. But ultimately, I think if you really analyze that, all those things are quote unquote great from this objectified solipsistic perspective. If you really try to open up and be a human or be an ethical subject here at the end of time, I think you'll realize that all that stuff just sucks and it's not worth it. And I do think it is directly tied to this type of nihilism that I want to talk about. And I don't know. It sucks. I think it's difficult to like explain because you don't want to give someone advice and say, hey, be foolhardy and put your full trust in everyone around you. Because it is true. The world is a scary, dangerous place, and scary, dangerous things happen. And you can be hurt, damaged, taken advantage of, and you will be hurt and damaged and taken advantage of. But that's no reason to become some kind of like demonic object. You want to be smart and you want to have, things in place to be resilient. But you can't avoid risk. And trying to avoid risk, you will always fail and you will always kind of become acquisitive and manipulative and grabby ultimately. You need risk. With great risk comes great reward. Also with great risk comes potentially great harm or damage or whatever. And if we ever want to build a world where we can mitigate that harm, that damage, we have to be willing to risk. We have to be willing to put our necks out. Exchange, the commodity, utility, this kind of super egoic conjunction that capital is giving us, that techno-capital is giving us, makes it, I think, impossible to do that because you're ultimately only worried about like your bottom line. And I think that is an important trend that we need to recognize and that we need to overcome. And we need to realize like that's contributing to this type of nihilism. And nihilism is a weird word. There's a lot of weird words. In fact, when you think about it, most words are weird. Maybe even all words are weird. Maybe just words, the concept of words or the phenomenon of words, the facticity of words themselves is weird. Words are like magic spells. You make a series of noises, phonemes, and with them you can conjure images and feelings, and you can even affect change in the world simply by uttering some syllables in a certain order. And you can make people feel things. You can make people think things. You can encourage people to do things. And you can make things appear as if out of thin air. Now, of course, there's always a kind of chain of causality, but ultimately, you can utter a word or a series of words and create something in the world that did not exist previously. Words are like magic. Anyway, nihilism is one of these weird words, like postmodernism. What do people mean when they're using it? I think for me, nihilism, when I was younger, when I was like a teenager, you hear about nihilism. You hear about Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, maybe even like Emil Kieran, and some of these guys, and you're like, yeah, that's cool, that's edgy. And so you kind of gravitate toward the edginess of it all. And maybe you kind of move on from it. Maybe you don't. I think there's a lot of males predominantly, but it's not exclusively a male thing, but it is male coded, we'll say. There are a lot of, men who never really leave that teenage boy phase and the edgelord phase. And so it's just like, nihilism, dark, doom, gothic stuff. I'm going to listen to sludge metal and, talk about how everything is meaningless and blah, blah, blah. And that definitely was enticing to me as a teenager. But, then I got a bit older and realized nihilism is actually like a really beautiful, joyous, wonderful, delicate thing. And I don't know, maybe it's not nihilism. Maybe it's some other type of physicalism or materialism, or I think it's ultimately like some version of ultimate humanism, because what it means is there's no cosmic insurance policy. It is up to us. Like, the ball is in our court. The responsibility lies with and within us, and it's up to us to kind of rise to the task. We're capable of imagining beauty and joy and love and all these wonderful things, and it's up to us to kind of effectuate and actualize these things in the world. And I think that's beautiful. But again, it comes down to being able to enter this kind of ethical relation and do the ethical thing and resist paranoia and resist this solipsistic urge to kind of protect yourself at all costs. And there's no insurance that things are going to work out right. It's taking a risk. It's taking the ultimate risk. So it's, rather than having some kind of like fanatical faith that you can place in a god or a prime mover, or an algorithm or an equation or some type of cosmic balance or whatever, or psychic protectors and watchers who will, spirits who will contact you if you can reach some vibrational frequency, and they'll tell you everything will be all right. It's all working out according to plan, blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to put this really fanatical faith in the other. You have to be a fanatic for the human, rather than being a fanatic for a god or a savior of some type, or a grand architect or whatever. And I think that's cool. I think we should all do that. We should encourage everyone to do that. And that's not to say like God necessarily doesn't exist. Like, sure, God can exist. That's fine. But if he is God, then he's necessarily not a part of this mortal plane, and so it still is necessarily up to us ultimately. So you can't sit back and have blind faith that everything will work out okay. You have to really put an earnest faith in the human, and in order to include yourself in that category of human, you have to be willing to put yourself at risk. But the commodity is safe. The commodity doesn't include any risk. There is no risk with the commodity. The commodity is this thing that simultaneously solves all the issues and answers all your questions while being unable to do so, and which is why the commodity is so effective, because it has this split. Like, it contains this narrative that like this will solve your problem, but because it fails to do so, that's what keeps you hooked on the commodity. You have to keep coming back for more, for the next commodity, for more commodities, because the next one is going to solve the issues, and it's going to, resolve all these crises and all these contradictions. And you'll have, this beautiful angelic reconciliation by way of the commodity. So believing in the commodity uncritically is a type of, paranoia where no one can help you. You have to do it on your own. And in order to acquire the next commodity, you have to be the one to shoulder the load, and you have to achieve great things, and you have to, by the sweat of your brow and by your toil and turmoil, and by virtue of your own internal greatness, you can earn enough value to purchase the next commodity, the commodity at the end of the universe that will solve all your problems and everything. So the ideology of the commodity, not only is it this contradictory one, which makes it effective, it's also a paranoid ideology, because rather than looking outside yourself and your social relations to the commodity, looking to the other to solve your problems and ultimately come away with the knowledge that there is no solution, the ideology of the commodity keeps you in this paranoid state where you can only look to yourself, because labor is the source of value. And so you alone must labor to achieve enough value to purchase the next commodity. So I think we need to resist it. But anyway, back to nihilism. I don't know. I do consider myself a nihilist, but I consider myself like a celebrant nihilist rather than an edgy nihilist. Although I'm into edgy stuff, you know. I'm into Bataille. I'm into Kieran. I'm into Nietzsche, or Nietzsche, as the French say. Nietzsche. I don't know. I can't pronounce French words the way French people pronounce them, but I do know that they don't say the I'm into Schopenhauer and Ligotti, and I'm even into Malthus. I'm into the edgy stuff. But look, Malthus is very complex. I'm not going to say like Malthus was right, because no, Malthus was not right. But I think the spirit of Malthus, if the letter is wrong, I think the spirit of Malthus deserves to be considered and to be tarried with, because I think the spirit is like, hey man, we got to change some things up. Now, like I said, the letter was wrong, obviously, but yeah, I think he was like, we're on a crash course with doom if we don't change. Same thing Marx was saying. Anyway, I'm a nihilist, but I don't like the kind of nihilism that I think is more popular. Fuck, man. Like, you know, existentialism, you know, Sartre and Camus and even Kafka. Like, there's a beauty in these things. And I think it's all trying to point out, like, we have to do something. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing good is going to happen if we don't try and do the good thing. And I think that's the message of nihilism. But the version of nihilism that's propagating through the internet and through the kind of social field today, it's very dangerous and it's very scary. Now, I haven't really had a whole lot of time to write lately, and that really sucks. There are a few things that I started that I'm still really excited about. I just haven't worked on them lately, and I do intend to get them done before moving on to other things. And it's both some fiction and some nonfiction. These projects that, you know, I started a few months ago and I've been really excited about. I just haven't been able to work on them. But I just started working on a new piece of theory about nihilism. And I was initially thinking it's a postmodern nihilism. And I think the grain came when I was thinking about cynicism and a kind of postmodern cynicism. Mikey and I were talking to Helen Rollins recently, and leading up to that conversation, which was excellent. Great conversation. It's up on the Dangerous Maybes YouTube channel right now. I think you should go listen to it. I can't wait to have another conversation with Helen. It was a really good conversation about her book, Psychocinema. And we were kind of talking about cinema and ideology and fantasy and all this stuff. And before that conversation, Mikey and I were going back and forth a little bit. And I started talking about Vince Vaughn and like a kind of postmodern cynicism that I see on the internet and in young people today. And the reason I like Vince Vaughn just kind of came to mind because there's something about Vince Vaughn movies that feel very kind of cynical, kind of ironic, kind of nihilistic in a weird way, but in a, I don't know, maybe not in a unique way, but in a particular way. So I was thinking, and I was like, oh, is it like a postmodern kind of cynicism? So we talked about that. Mikey and I talked about it a little bit, talked about it with some other people. And then from that, I kind of moved on to, maybe it's not a exactly just a cynicism. Maybe it's a kind of nihilism. And in that, you have this kind of like irony, you have this cynicism, but it's ultimately rooted in a kind of nihilism. So then, I was talking to Mikey about postmodern nihilism. And then I realized, well, I'm not really satisfied with calling it postmodern nihilism, because I think postmodernism is just too slippery a word. And I have this tendency to want to use it in my own particular way. And sometimes I use it to mean something is really good. And sometimes I use it to say something is not so good. And it's just too slippery a word. So we were kind of going back and forth. And I settled on post-millennial nihilism to kind of differentiate this nihilism from what I think of as, modern nihilism and existentialism, and even like postmodern nihilism. Like, in a sense, when I say postmodern nihilism, I think Nietzsche. And when I think Nietzsche, I think good, excellent. It's us. Like, we now have an opportunity. We're no longer locked in this prison. We're free to make meaning and make joy and beauty and wondrous things and love and all that. So it's an emancipation. So I actually think like postmodern nihilism sounds too positive for me. So post-millennial nihilism, I kind of landed on it. Post-millennial, who talks about, post-millennial, the post-millennial left? Chris Catrone talks about it. And I think he's onto something there. I also think it kind of says what I want to say. Post-millennial, meaning like the world we live in now, and the world we've lived in for the last, 25 years, but, really getting to the point the last maybe 10, 15 years. There's this kind of post-millennial nihilism. People have talked about like irony and post-irony. People have talked about like cynicism and postmodern cynicism. But I think it's all kind of stemming from the nihilism of, the internet age, or, the web 2.0 age, or whatever. And I think it's really dangerous. I think it's really scary. And I want to stick up for nihilism. And I also kind of want to like sound some alarm bells. Because I think it's really bad. So actually, I am going to pause right now because I think I have something to do, but I will be right back. Okie dokie. Back. And I'm actually going to have to jump again in like half an hour. So if I can get this done in the next half an hour, then that'll be good. That'll be an episode. But anyway, so nihilism, post-millennial nihilism, working on a piece. Mikey and I we're both excited about it. And it ties into this kind of superegoic techno-capital AI that's pushing us toward a kind of paranoid, nihilist, violent, extreme, total objectification. Anyway, so I am hopefully going to be able to get that written soon. And get it up and get it out, get it shared with the world. And it ties into the piece Mikey and I wrote together, Enjoy Your Surveillance. Ties into a piece Mikey wrote on kind of superego and this kind of superegoic surveillance. It ties into my hypercoke piece. And it's going to be like a continuation of that, of what we're talking about with superego, with the objectifying force that is techno-capital, that is, the commodity object at the end of time. So that's all cool. And also, recently, like last week, my kid had a dream and she was really disturbed. And it struck me. So I have bad dreams a lot. I used to get night terrors all the time. I get them less often now, but they still come. But But even when I'm not having a night terror, having the succubus sitting on your chest, or the incubus, climbing up the bed, whatever, the Hat Man, whatever, sleep paralysis, like all these kind of like dysomnia, or I don't know, they call it something. Like it's not insomnia, it's like a dysomnia. I don't know. Anyway, even when I'm not having one of those, like I still tend to have less than pleasant dreams. And sometimes I dream about like, dead people who from my life are dead, kind of coming back and talking to me, telling me stuff. Or sometimes I dream about like just being trapped somewhere and I can't get up, or other bad things. But they're all, generally like, yeah, I get it, it is what it is. And I hate bad dreams. I wish no one had to have like really bad dreams. I think, we should have some unpleasant dreams. That's probably important, but like terrifying dreams. I think it would be cool if no one ever had to have a terrifying dream again, even though I think they're probably responsible for some great works of art and even probably some great works of theory and philosophy as well. Bad dreams are sad and it sucks. And I hate that people have to deal with them. My kid had a bad dream. She has bad dreams from time to time, but this one was really disturbing. And she was telling us about it, and it was about a school shooting. And that was like, it was sad, dude. Like it kind of really did like fuck me up. And she was kind of recounting like it was a very realistic dream for her, and like, going through the hallways, and it was actually really sweet. Like she went into the SPED classroom and was like trying to help the SPED kids, and the shooter was like outside the classroom and she was in there, and it was fucking horrible. And it really sucks that like that's the world our kids live in now, that like they have dreams about these tragedies that are all too common. And I don't know, that was like really disturbing. But it's also the world we live in, and it's also true. Like that's just a truth about the world we live in. These horrible things happen. They happen all the time. We feel helpless. We feel terrified. We feel desperate and hopeless. And it's ultimately a man-made tragedy. And thinking about these tragedies, and not just these specifically, mass violent events, mass attacks, mass terror attacks in general, and political violence. We see a lot of senseless, horrible things that get called political violence. And when they get called political violence, people always try to impute like a political goal, and a political framework and a political ideology behind these attacks. We saw it with the recent tragedies here in America. And to say recent tragedies here in America, what does that even mean? That's kind of like one of these disavowals. It's like the recent tragedy, like that is a disavowal in a weird way. But we saw it there was a shooting in an ICE facility that the FBI director, Mr. Cash Money, I think he took a blue Sharpie and wrote stuff on the shells because it said like ICE bad or fuck ICE or something. I think that might have been manufactured. But we saw it with the Charlie Kirk shooting, which just, look, Charlie Kirk, that happened. And I think largely people have already forgotten about it. I think there are some people who are, I don't think, I know there are some people who are just kind of like swinging at low-hanging fruit by continuing to like spin a narrative out of it. And whatever. But with that shooting, there were, people saying, "Oh, it's a far right extremist," and then people misunderstanding memes and saying, "No, this is like a trans furry thing, and trans furry extremists are left extremists," and blah blah blah. But we've seen it with other shootings as well. There was a church shooting, and another school shooting that, the media coverage really focused on like the messaging, and people wrote manifestos and people scrawl things on the weapons and their gear and their ammunition and stuff. And it's all like internet memes, and it's all, I think, politically confusing to people who don't spend an awful lot of time on the internet or who aren't critical when they are on the internet. I think even for people who spend a lot of time on the internet, they're not doing it critically, and so they get carried away with kind of narratives. But I think by design, these people who do these radical acts of senseless, unspeakable violence, they play around with political ideology. They play around with like, am I far right? Am I far left? You don't know. It's all a joke anyway. Ha ha ha. We have no future. Everything is meaningless. Let's all just fucking die. There's a type of cynicism. There's a type of irony. There's a type of nihilism in all these things. And that is, I think, what's really going on. I don't think we should waste time trying to talk about the politics of the people who do these things, because it's not political. For them, politics is dead. For them, politics doesn't exist. Now, I think the reason these things have like a far-right veneer that, and sometimes they do have a far-left veneer, but generally these things, from the critical position, not being carried away in any political narrative, but like actually critically looking at these things. Yes, it is true. There is a lot of far right iconography, and kind of aesthetic. The Nazis and Black Sun and just I don't know, weird shit. But it is also true that there is some far left ideology or iconography and aesthetics that gets caught up in this stuff too. Stalin is really big and popular in this kind of like internet nihilist thing, and jokes about being trans are very popular, and for whatever reason people can't stop associating trans with the left and the far left, and I think there are many reasons for that, and ultimately I think if you're worried about like emancipation, then gender structures are something that hold us back and that hinder us, or tend to, or can, or have that potential, and so like a real emancipatory view would of course be like, be trans or don't, it doesn't matter. But the whole messaging thing, like the trans furry queering of society, gets associated with the left and whatever. I think the reason, I know, like the reason the far right iconography and aesthetic is more predominant, even though the far left iconography is also included in this, the reason it tends to look far right is because there are nihilist groups and this kind of like post-millennial nihilism this kind of unbridled acceleration, this kind of really virulent anti-humanist position of like nothing means anything. So let's all just kind of go out with a bang. And again, there's this super egoic dimension of it where it's like, go out with the bang. It's all for the lulz, man. Like, yeah, be the funniest guy, be the biggest meme lord, be the biggest edgelord or whatever. Like that's the super ego, like telling you to transgress and do it better and do it brighter and do it with a smile on your face. So it's all, I don't know, it's a knot that we're trying to like trace all the fucking individual threads and kind of untie the knot. But the reason these types of extreme actions and you know, mass violent events tend to have a far right aesthetic is because they draw their roots all the way back to like far right groups and like cells and like undercover shit. And you can look and it does go back to World War II, funnily enough. And it goes back to like the OSS and the CIA and Operation Gladio. There were groups that were explicitly anti-communist who were kind of deeply embedded in communist places in Europe and even in America. There was a lot of like anti-communist government activity that was misguided, and that became the core, the root of like violent extremist organizations in Europe and in America. And I don't know. I don't know the history of Asia or Africa, so I can't talk on that. But in Europe and in America, there are like far right extremist groups that do go all the way back to government activity, anti-communist government activity. Over time, these groups became more and more extreme, more and more violent. And we saw it on the left too, stuff like the Weathermen and, you know, all that stuff. And even like the anarchist cookbook type thing. You could even say that Ted Kaczynski, people confuse him for being left or right. But again, ultimately, I don't think he was either. I do think he had reactionary views and positions, but ultimately, like, his aim was not necessarily far right or far left. His aim was accelerate. Let's burn it all down. I'm the Joker, baby. That whole thing. Violent acceleration. But these groups that started out as, you know, anti-communist government activities got more and more extreme, and then they became like far-right extremists, and then violent far-right extremists. And then that violence and extremism became like a positive feedback loop. And the violence and the extremism became the point and became the ideology. It was no longer about, are we anti-capitalist? Are we anti-communist? Are we liberal? Are we feudalists? Are we monarchists? Are we anarchists? Or whatever. Like it became like, no, we're just violent extremists. And there's actually, let me look this up. There's a journalist who did excellent reporting. Give me a second. My computer is being slow, and my dogs are farting up a storm, actually. It's crazy. If you could smell through the camera, you would be amused, because, oh my goodness, this smells insane. Come on, internet. Why are you being so stupid, internet? Hold on. Jeez Louise, dude. Okay. Let me see this journalist's name. Ali Winston is the journalist. Let me see the name of the piece. Now I can't find it. He wrote a book about police corruption. And that was cool. But he's also done... So The Writers Come Out at Night. That's the book he wrote about police corruption in the PNW, I think, in Oakland. Okay, police brutality and police corruption in Oakland. But he's also done work on Terrorgram, and that is where he really goes into the history of this. What are they calling it? Nihilistic violent extremists. So on Wired.com, Ali Winston, the trial at the tip of the Terrorgram iceberg. This is coverage of one of the guys from Atomwaffen. But anyway, if you're not convinced, which I did a horrible job trying to say what I was trying to say, talking about like the history of these like violent nihilist stuff. Look into Ali Winston. He does excellent work on this stuff, but he kind of lays out why the aesthetics tend to be far right, but also like they tend to be far left too. But he's getting at the nihilism, this kind of post-millennial nihilism at the core. Like the violence, the accelerationism is the point. There is no politics. And that, I think that's important. That's what we need to like come to terms with. We need to stop pretending that this is just far right reactionary politics. We need to stop pretending that it's far left emancipatory politics. And look, for me, it breaks down. Like when people say, "Oh yeah, the left and the violence on the left," like it's just like you're just wrong. Sorry, dude. But also, like I can understand how someone would be led to believe, "Oh, it's them, it's not us. It's them, it's not us." Like that's my point. We need to get away from the us and them thing, and we need to realize like this new post-millennial nihilism is the thing that we're really contending with. We're not contending with identity politics. We're not contending with, oh, you think trans people exist, and oh, you think trans people don't exist, and oh, you're a furry, and oh, you're not a furry, and oh, you want to queer us up, or oh, you think queers don't deserve rights, blah, blah, blah. Like these things are real, and these things, cause harm in people's lives. But the extreme violence isn't coming from people who believe in God and people who have, people who react against change and people who are like, ooh, I'm not so sure that's a little different. I want to protect my way of life. I'm not so sure about those other people that are different. The root of this festering violence is this kind of post-millennial nihilism. A while ago, Mikey and I talked about the Raja Jackson incident when Raja Jackson like almost beat this dude to death on stream. And we talked about this super egoic, cyber positive feedback loop of jouissance. And that's what these post-millennial nihilist groups are. They become this cyber positive loop. And it's super egoic. Like the young people don't have a future. There is no political solution. Politics don't exist for young people because the future doesn't exist for young people. When you think about politics, you think about improving the world around you immediately and improving your future opportunities to have a better life, live in a better world. When that future is foreclosed, you don't have politics anymore. So what is there for you? Well, for young people today, it's the screen, and it's these media environments, and it's all this kind of super egoic thing to do the next big, spectacular, sensational thing, so you can get that immediate gratification and that immediate praise. And how do you get that? You get that by performing, more extreme. And so people are caught up in this world without a real world. Like, there's nothing real anymore. It's all on the screen, and it's all about how edgy can you be, how many edgelord points, or how cool of a meme can you make? Because it's all fake. We're all objects. We're all characters on a stage. And we're all deeply hurting. And I think we have to be able to come together somehow. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of petered out and lost track of where I was going. But these are my thoughts. This post-millennial nihilism, I think it's very dangerous. I think we should talk about it. I'm going to be writing about it. And I think that's the real ideology, or the real politics that are responsible for a lot of the horrible things that are going on. Not liberalism, not conservatism, not, and I do think this nihilism is reactionary properly, but to say the word reactionary, sometimes the meaning is kind of lost when you use that word. But it's not about like, oh, I'm a conservative Christian versus, oh, I'm a liberal atheist. It's not about that. It's about the fact that there is no world. There is no future. All we have is this kind of simulated environment where this immediate gratification is the only thing that exists. We don't even see ourselves as people anymore, because the world we live in, the commodity object at the end of time, is reaching backwards through time and like closing off our view, and we can't see the other. And because we can't see the other, we can't see ourselves as people. We don't recognize ourselves. And that's weird, because that almost sounds like I'm reaching for some, grand unifying narrative, or some grand totalizing narrative of like, you belong to something bigger than yourself. And it's true, but that thing to which you belong that is bigger than yourself is precisely a thing that cannot be thinged. The moment you thing it, the moment you name it, you destroy it. So it's kind of like resisting this grand totalizing narrative by reaching for this kind of infinite, ongoing, ever unfolding thing. And the minute you drop out of that ongoing process, you become objectified. You become this solipsistic little node. And it's, it's easy to get carried away. And I think we need to be careful not to do that. So those are my thoughts, rambling and wandering as they may be. And yeah, I think that's it. I have to go. Where'd you go, button? There you go. There's my button. This is me playing you out, playing myself off stage. I have to go do some things today. But I think, I think I'm going to get this up and give you all the opportunity to listen to me rant and ramble. I wanted to also go into, Mikey and I just had an awesome conversation with Marek Pollux and Roberto Alonso trio. We talked about exocapitalism. Excellent book. Excellent conversation. It's on the Dangerous Maybes YouTube channel right now. Go listen to it. I've actually got some feedback from some people that conversation helped them in reading the book and kind of coping and grappling with that book. So that's good. I think more people need to read the book. But I wanted to talk about that conversation a little bit as well, because I have some lingering thoughts. But hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk to them again soon. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk to some more awesome people. Got some plans. Hopefully have some friends on soon, talk about some cool stuff. But in the meantime, thanks for your time and attention. I appreciate it. I hope you're well, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.